if I say that it is very clear for all to see, we have got our priests, our nuns, if we have to talk from that perspective. But I think going a little beyond that, yes, sometimes as Doctor has mentioned, we tend to interpret things to suit our maybe wants, not even needs. And oftentimes I think the kind of Christianity practice is that we interpret the verses according to our wants, according to our targets. So, though I may not be really answering to your expected level, yet, yes, from Catholic perspective, we know that and we believe that God created us equals, each to complement the other. So I think in every place that complementary roles should be duly acknowledged and upheld and upheld. When we talk about the rights of women, the human rights, etc., we are immediately informed that all these are drawn from the Bible. Now it has become so very secular byword that we tend to think that human rights is based on some principle outside the Bible. But yes, human rights are all drawn from the Bible. I think it will help us to understand that. If I may take 1 or 2 minutes on this. See, the very fact that God created us in His own image and likeness also goes on to say that irrespective of our look or our mental this make, there is that presence, that image and likeness of God in every human being. So I just made a run of a sentence, but I would like to elaborate here. If I say that I am a worshipper of God, I praise Him daily, I sing in His glorification, but if I fail to honor you, to respect you, isn't that a sham? Is my belief truly based on the Bible, according to the teachings of Christ? Is it, as Christians? I do not think so. Because if I'm a true Christian, I should also know that in you there is that image and likeness of God, just as it is in me. So we must honor that part of God in each of us. If I think we can take this, the base, the foundation of our faith strengthening effort, faith pursuit, then I think harmony in society is just a gone word. I'm not trying to paint us a utopian scene before us, but I think as Christians, we are required to practice this. As Christians, we are to build our society rested upon this recognition and this due acknowledgement.
I'm Dr. Morung, a free man of free country. We have all agreed that there is disharmony. Should we give paracetamol or shall we diagnose the real disease germ and give specific treatment? I will ask only 2 questions. So one question. Another question. In a secular welfare state, the question of who is my neighbor is not relevant. The question has now become, what is good for my neighbor? This is not a question to the resource person, but for every one of us. shall we find out the answers. Thank you.
So, any specific diagnosis?
See, one of the principles in Catholic social teaching is the principle of subsidiarity. Now, what does this subsidiarity mean? Subsidiarity actually is an empowerment right from the grassroots level. So just like the tools of democracy, in subsidiarity, it entails upon the even most vulnerable members of the society to enable them to think, to work out what is best for them. And that voice, that decision is honored, that is promoted, and that goes up. That is the kind of principle that the Catholic social teaching has adopted for itself and is working upon it. Now, again, yes, in addition to that, there's another principle which is the care for God's creation. In this principle, we are enabled to care for every created object. Every object that is created by God and given to us to be masters over them should not be simply utilized or to satisfy our selfish or our wanton, should I say once again here. But they should be cared for. It's the stewardship that God entrusted upon us over all these creations. So I think milieu of this will further strengthen our search for working on, or rather the search for harmony.
I think when we talk about diagnosis in the context of the church's role in promoting harmony, I believe that the church is not a legal body, and I do not believe that the church should take the rights-based approach when we engage in peacemaking. That is for other bodies of the society to take up. And therefore, I think the church's role is for reconciliation, whether we initiate for mutual reconciliation or a mediatory reconciliation. The task of reconciliation is, I think, basic to the role of the church. So I think for diagnosis, we leave it to other organs of the society, and we work as a church, as Christians, we work for reconciliation. One of the problems that I see among the Naga Christians is how easily we switch our loyalty and our identity as a Naga and our identity as a Christian. I think that switch of loyalty is a problem that the church needs to address, and I think Dr. Keyho has really underlined very important points for the church to emphasize on, so that we continue to assert our Naganess, but what is the driving force in our daily life? Is that our Christian identity, or is that our ethnic traditional identity? I think we need to be driven by our Christian identity, and that is why I keep on emphasizing on the need of solid moral, spiritual grounding on the Word of God.
Yeah, just one comment here. The church wanting to be everything is dragging us to lose our focus. We want to be a social scientist. We want to be a political science scientist. We want to be a historian. And we forget that in the first place, we are called to serve the church. Not even to say we are not called to be theological. But if we are to go back, there is no other way through which we must return. but we must go back to the Bible, to the biblical teaching. And if we go back to that biblical teaching, I think many of our problems that we are facing today will just diminish. Half of it will be minimized. But that journey is going to be long. And we cannot just be talking and talking, but I think we need to follow the roadmap so that we get there. And if during our time we don't get, at least let us hope that the next generation will take the church and the Naga society there.
Thank you for the insightful papers, and also thank you to the Morung Express for giving us a very kind of an open invitation to be a part of this lecture. I've been so much envious about the lectures that have been seen in Dimapur, and now you have made it in Kohima. So thank you for that. Just three things that I wanted to just my observations based on these three presentations. First one, I see the topic, role of religion in promoting inter-tribe harmony among Nagas. The word harmony appears to be a little too shallow. Sometimes because it's just like Hindu, Muslims in India, different religious groups trying to just live together without taking care of each other, just trying to be just doing their own business and living up without causing harm to each other, turning into a harmony. Maybe I'm wrong, but I see that in this juncture for Nagas, tribes, it's kind of creating a great community, a religious, from whichever perspective we take, creating a deep religious aspect where we have both critics as well as conversations, free to do together, living as a community. That's what I was feeling like. So harmony, it's possible, but I think turning into a community perspective could also be a more enhancing thinking than what I was feeling. Secondly, both our three presenters have talked about peace and harmony, and also to give some supplementations on the truth and reconciliations. But I think from a Christian biblical point of view, as far as my knowledge goes, truth and righteousness and justice absence and trying to create the peace, I think this is just kind of a very worldly understanding of peace from a religious Christian point of view. I think when we talk about peace, we should also bring a very strong critique on how Nagas are truthful, honest, and righteous to each other, and then how we are trying to bring a harmonious peace to each other in the long run as a community. Because Jesus talks about in several passages in the Gospel that I came not to bring peace. The Prince of Peace is talking about I came not to bring peace but to bring divisions. And we also see how metaphorically we can integrate into another context and see how truth and righteousness approach to peace may also give a long-lasting peace solution. I'm very much convinced by the Morung often theatrical writes about how they were blessed by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa. We talk about the spirit of Mandela now, but I think it's more about truth rather than the spirit of Mandela. Mandela might have lived out the truth. That's why people have talked about this, that my hunch is that. Thirdly, Dr. Eyingbeni talked a lot on emphasizing on the theology of the land. And also we have heard from our Dr. Keyho about the 10 points on this roadmap. Now we have heard a lot on the more anthropocentric approach to the peace. So much of a people-oriented peace that we're talking about. I think this is kind of so much into the Western concept of peace and theologizing. I think what we tribal people can also contribute is about the cosmocentric approach to peace, which we have talked about the theology of land. but also in the presentation, more about a human-to-human way of bringing peace. But is it possible to bring peace among humans, one of the part of creations, neglecting at the cost of cosmic, at the cost of world nature? And I believe the Catholic have a strong nature theology, which they can also critically come into conversation with the Naga or maybe a tribal worldview, and give us a very strong view on the cosmic-centric approach to get peace in the constellation among our tribal people, which we have so much, as was rightly pointed out, land-based people. So I'm wondering if we put more on the cosmetric approach, cosmocentric approach to the peace and reconciliation, rather than so much confined to the anthropocentric approach to peace. Just my few hunches, but it doesn't mean that I'm right, but I'm just, my observation, I'm just sharing it. Maybe you may have an answer, you may not have, but I'm just the few things that we can think about in a larger sense. Thank you.
I think the Naga Christian Church must ensure a very strong moral base for our people. For anything to positively work, I think this is the first requirement. But you know, oftentimes, if I may take you a little on a different trip. See, yesterday I was conversing with a friend in Nagaland. He told me that people are very busy preparing for the coming of the Amur Falgun, and they have got a big feast waiting for the bird's eye. So I was just jokingly telling him, yesterday it was the whites who came and gave us the message, and we are still drunk with it. I'm talking about Christianity. Today again it's taking, birds from across the sea to push us to do some other thing. See, this is always the case with us Nagas. It always takes some people or something beyond us to make us realize that we are alive, that we are also capable of doing things, that we also have got a bigger role of even enabling other people, not only the others, to do better things, to fulfill more noble objectives. So even here, if I may, for a moment, allow me to say as an ordinary participant, not as a member from the church. If I may say, oftentimes we forget the potentials in us. See, we have got so rich cultural values amongst us, amongst the Nagas. Yet, in course of inculturation, what we have taken with us is not the good values, but the bad ones. And that is where we are polluting even the Christian values as well. So I think we need to have a real stare at the way we are doing to Christianity or to religion. To me, I'm not trying to answer to Uncle Solo's posings, yet to me religion is pure. It is just that the members of the religion or a religion are making it appear to be so, appear to be impure, violent, very fundamental, and we can see those mindsets translated even in our home, at our home front also. He made a mention of a Catholic church which was being constructed, burned. Yes, it was not the church that burned it. It was few individuals who misunderstood the whole message of Christianity and the Christian values and the Christian principles. So it is like that. So I think, yes, as we move along, maybe we will not only look at our society from the religion perspective. I would not call religious also. But let us also look at religion from Naga positive cultural perspectives also, so that we can blend our adopted religion, our adopted faith, with the good aspects of our culture, of our being. Thank you.
Dr. Eyingbeni.
Yeah, I agree that the word community may be a better substitute for harmony, but I also do not think that the word harmony is artificial or shallow, because I think it is an essential component of peace. I have seen households where family members, parents, children live together, they share together. Of course, most children depend on parents even for their basic necessities, but they don't even talk. They are at war in their own way. There is no harmony. So there is the community in the family, but there is no harmony. So I think harmony is a very essential component of peace. We should not, I don't think that we should undermine the importance of harmony. The second question is a critique that our presentation has been quite anthropocentric. I think we have been made, especially in the church circle, we have been made to think of cosmic interpretation. And most of it, I think, comes from some of the indigenous theologians, like Tinker is one of them, and also our own tribal theologians, or Lotha, very land-centered approach to life. But personally, I'm also a critic of those theologies. I'm more of a theocentric, I take a God-centric approach to reality. And when I say God-centric approach to reality, it's not simply transcendental, because I see that my relationship with God propels me to be in good relationship with my fellow human being as well as with the whole of creation, because this is what God has made, and God has made me. And so I respect your opinion about the cosmic-centered or a land-centered approach to reality, but I personally have more trust in a God-centric approach, and I think that will also enable us to create a more peaceable world.
Reverend Keyho.
Just a footnote to that. I agree with Dr. Eyingbeni, and I think if we get what she meant when she was talking there, she has clearly pointed out that land is a gift from God. It's a gift of God. And the anthropocentric would look at the two other definitions, but fail to look at the third dimension that she brought. And I have also given this tri-theology, God, man, and the world. We are maybe on an individual basis relating very well with God, but we are not relating well with the other beings around us, even for that matter, the created order or the created world. And unless we take these two components very seriously, faith in God becomes very, there is no dynamism in our faith in God. So I think God, man, and the world is something that we must take very seriously. And maybe it sounded anthropocentric because we are trying to converse and dialogue with some of the problems that we are facing. Perhaps it came out that way. But whatever the church aims for, or longs to do has to be theocentric, or even for that matter, Christocentric. If without that, we will be failing. The church will be dragged into so many things that we cannot even define ourselves. So I think God, man, and the world is a relational, or the way we relate to these three components as Christian will define who we are and what we are, what we believe. So I think the church must take a very serious note on that aspect.
Thank you. Okay, we have just about time for 2 questions. One will be at the end, Mr. Yantan's, but are your questions answered? We had a long discussion between the...
My name is Koto Sabi. I'm a law practitioner and a social activist. This is not a question, rather it's substantiate. In the beginning of our talk, Dr. Eyingbeni mentioned about Nagaland. Mentioned about Nagaland. Now, when I look at the Nagaland, one of the main major role of Nagaland is also to promote harmony among the Nagas. Now, when we look at it today, the several tribes going away, disassociation, and because of what? It's just because of the indigenous tribal issues. Now, when we look at the tribal issues here, this is nothing but the indigenous inhabitants. When we talk about indigenous inhabitants, it is the original inhabitants. In Nagaland government, the competent authority issue indigenous inhabitant certificate. That is, this is entitled to someone who is originally inhabitant of the land. Now, every tribe has its own origin. Now, the issue here, I'm not going back to the issue what Navajo is facing today. But at the same time, Eyingbeni has also suggested about peace committee. My concern here is similarly, why not the church also initiate a committee on human rights? Because indigenous people is nothing but coming under the subject of human rights. Today the issues of indigenous people is very, very important. Just a month ago, we celebrated the International Day for World's Indigenous People. And from the celebration, I calculate that awareness is very lacking. People are not concerned and aware of what is the right of indigenous people. The whole Nagaland, there was only 2 programs. And my friend, Secretary General, sitting there, he addressed the keynote in one of the programs. I addressed the keynote in another program. That was the only program. So my concern here is, why not we also initiate? Because the policymakers, the politicians, the bureaucrats, they all belong to one church or the other. And had we are well aware of indigenous people's right, I don't think this may be the issue. So this is not a question but an opinion sharing.
My name is Zelhou. I pastor the Union Baptist Church in Kohima. 3 or 4 questions. One is religion the dividing factor of community, or strife in community, or is it adherence of religion that causes that? And I think our speaker, Mr. Elias, already mentioned that a little bit. But the second part of the first question is religion truly neutral, as one of the members has mentioned? Is it neutral? Because, and I'm speaking this from a Christian perspective, the golden rule that we all know is do to others what you would want others to do to you. And when you follow that principle, that rule, it calls for not maintaining that status quo, not disturbing the other person's, the other person, but it calls for participating and engaging, as Brazil has already mentioned. That's one. Number two, the second question is there a difference between tribal affinity, from which we draw our tribal identity, difference between tribal affinity and tribalism? If so, why are they, if it is the same, how is it the same? If it's different, how is it different? Because I think I can speak for myself. Sometimes I mix up the two, and so that clarification will truly help us. The third question is talking about not a question. This is just a comment to add to what Reverend Zelhou has mentioned. He mentioned about escape and two attitudes: escape and engagement. And I would like to add one more, which is not my idea, but this is what Timothy Keller says. He also talks about triumphalism. Escape is withdrawal, and the other extreme is triumphalism. Escape is, let's not get involved in this tribal issue. Let's not get involved in the affairs of the other community and just keep quiet. The other extreme is triumphalism, or let's win everybody to the extent of making it sound like utopian. Let every tribe come together under one church umbrella. Probably that's triumphalism. But I think what Zelhou has mentioned, engaging with one another, I believe that's what we truly need right now, that we engage at a very personal level without making it an event. And in Nagaland, that's the easiest way to do. Everything is event-based. Sanitation, event. Everything is event-based. And I would like to reiterate what Dr. Zelhou has already said about engagement and engaging at a personal level, whether people know it or not. And that's the example of the Good Samaritan. There was no crowd, there was nobody to applaud him, there was nobody to cheer him, but he just did what he needs to do, engaging with that wounded man, and he became a neighbor to that wounded man. I think that's what. Thank you.
About 80 years ago, when Baptist faith came to my village, it created reservation problem, and that is, we had the boys had almost cry and demand from the father to send them to school. And the moment they go to a Sunday school, the father and the mother used to beat up their children. It was a human right violation, where they were, a situation was created for them to demand right of education. After some time, the father relaxed and then said, okay, motado chavo bare. Holbi mighty to treat them with chabonali. So the girls were deprived from schooling. So at that point of time now, the girls had to demand for 33% to go to school. So as of now, in our Naga society, maybe this is just purely my personal opinion, I don't think the girls and the women are deprived of to that extent, where in some communities where the women folk are not even allowed to enter, say, a church. And in fact, in the Bible, no woman was allowed to enter the sanctuary area. Along with the Gentiles, the Jewish women were kept outside the fourth wall. The innermost wall was only for the high priest. And then the outer wall, the second wall, was for the other priests. And then the third was for the men folk. And then the last outside was for the Gentiles, including us, and for the women of the Jews. You know, the Bible, if we were to go deep into the Bible, one of the hermeneutical understanding, interpretation of the rib out of which Eve was made is actually, scientifically speaking, from a raw iron ore, we get iron. On further refinement of the iron, we get steel. And so, scientifically speaking, that is it. And then from the philosophical point of view also, actually, man was made out of raw material from the earth, and the woman was made out of the rib of Adam, which is a finished product, which means that a woman is more superior than the men, philosophically speaking and scientifically speaking. So I do not know why our women are fighting for, since they are not deprived of anything. There is no more power even for a woman to become a reverend now. Of course, a few years maybe there was.
I think I can answer those questions privately with the this may not be direct answer to this question, but as part of my conclusion, I think I want to say this. I agree with what he said. The third dimension is the escape, engagement, and also triumphalism, right? And I think we have unconsciously used that as part of engagement, and that is quite revealing, because in trying to assert ourselves or engage ourselves with other people, we are also unconsciously displaying our superiority. And maybe that is the reason why the spirit of tribalism is finding hard to die. Another comment would be this. We cannot just stop here. This is incomplete. This is just an introduction to a long dialogue or a lengthy dialogue that should happen. And it has opened up the issue of interfaith dialogue, which one of our brother has said, pointed out the importance of it. And we must take that very seriously, so that we begin to see that aspect even here in Kohima. In Dimapur they have, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that is good. And the world, the secular world, sometimes we tend to divide the two kingdoms, the sacred and the secular. But the secular also should enter into inter-tribal dialogue, because this is not just only one institution's responsibility. So I think the secular world must enter into this inter-tribal dialogue and then try to find the solution. I have mentioned earlier, I have said earlier, that the church is just only one institution. Maybe it is a uniting institution, but unfortunately, we also have heard about the divide factor even in the church, which is unfortunate. But this is not to defend the church or denominations, but the divide will always be there. But we should harness things that we can use to bring the community closer. I know this is not an answer to the questions that you have raised, but I raised my case there.
maybe I'll just continue in the same line with the first question: is religion a dividing factor? And I think I would simply say no, it is not. Some of the teachings of religion and those who have misinterpreted the teachings, I think they cause conflict, they cause division. Even the Muslims have come out and said that Muslim is a peace-loving religion. Jihad is not about terrorism, it is about discipline. So I think religion per se does not divide. It is the way we interpret, understand, and also manipulate religion that is causing division and conflict. And the second question, whether religion should be neutral, or for that matter, whether churches should be neutral in conflict situation. And again, I would say no. I don't think that neutrality is the call of the church. The church is called to engage, as you have rightly used the word, engage itself with conflict situations, not, as I have mentioned, not taking a legalistic stand and saying you are right, you are wrong, but in terms of bringing about reconciliation on theological basis. We have talked enough on that. And I think reconciliation is a tedious job. It is not an easy task. It is not a fast food. There is a lot of things involved in the process of reconciliation, but whatever the process may be, it is active engagement. So I think we have to understand that reconciliation is about active engagement in trying to resolve conflict situation, and that is why the need for establishing peace departments, peace committee, or peace and justice committees within the association level and also within the church, I think is the need of the hour. Simply establishing sporadic committees, I think, will not resolve, because even those involved in it needs education, and they in turn need also to educate the members. So it is a long process, but nonetheless active engagement. And so I think it's not about neutrality. The third question, very quickly, about the difference between tribal affinity and tribalism. Just last November, there was a racism seminar in our college organized by the Peace branch, and people from other states also came and talked about it. We discussed so much about it. The problem coming back to Nagaland is not so much racism as such, but about tribalism. So I think in that seminar there was much talk about how to differentiate tribal affinity from tribalism. And I think very simply put, tribal affinity, when we talk about tribal affinity, it's our nature. We are born as a tribal. You are born as a Naga. It is something that you cannot change. But tribalism is a nurtured thing. It is nurtured, it is influenced by many factors, and I think sometimes if we are not careful, our tribal affinity, our nature, can be influenced by tribalism, and I think that is when the problem arises. Conflict situations are triggered by it. So I think that there needs to be that very conscious attempt from the side of every Naga, I think, to differentiate between our tribal identity, affinity, from tribalism.
I don't think I need to add anything more to what our two speakers have stated. But just a single sentence run of the difference between affinity and tribal affinity and tribalism. See, tribal affinity, which is a very noble thing, it comes naturally to us. You cannot order it, you cannot change it. But tribalism is voluntary act, which is very negative. I think that suffices to say. And with that, I thank the organizers for enabling us to share this moment you. Thank you.
Thank you, speakers. I think we are towards the end, but we are not yet finished. To give the concluding remarks, I invite Dr. Humtsoe-Nienu, editor of the Morung Express, to give us a few remarks.
Good evening. It's been almost 4 hours. Just thank you for your patience and for sitting and participating. Well, religion is both very personal as well as very social. And so it can get personal, and yet at the same time, it is something for us as a community to address. Before I make my closing remarks, just a few assumptions that or rather dilemmas, let me put in the form of dilemmas that I strongly felt coming across in the last 4 hours. One is, when we talk of harmony and unity, are we mistaking it for uniformity? That seems to be coming very strongly. We seem to be talking more about uniformity rather than celebrating the richness of human life. So is uniformity unity? Or do we mean something much more than that? The second assumption is, about 15 years ago, a very senior church leader said Nagas have a very concrete and narrow understanding of Christianity. Nagas have a very narrow but very concrete understanding of Christianity. And for some reason I felt that coming very strongly this afternoon. The third assumption is, has Christian values failed, or is it the frailty of humanity that has failed? To me, I think that's where we seem to be in a dilemma. Has our own human frailty, is it in question, or is it the values of Christ that has failed? I think that is something for us to really contemplate on. And final assumption is, do we think that we're dwelling too much in the abstract and hence missing the point? Are we dwelling too much in the abstract? And since we're dwelling too much in the abstract, are we missing the point? So those are my assumptions which I just want to put before you, before I make my concluding remarks. This is the 6th Morung lecture, 5 we've had in Dimako, and this is the first time in Kohima. So thank you so much, especially our speakers, for their presence, for their wisdom, for their experience, for sharing, and also making themselves vulnerable to each and every one of us, so that we can engage with them in a way that is productive. In the course of the years, we have observed that Nagas, we dialogue, we discuss. But sometimes I feel it's a dialogue between two monologues. Everyone is making their point. We come to a meeting, everyone is making their point, but we're not listening to each other. Organizations speak, they reiterate their positions, they affirm their positions. Is that what consultations have come to? Is that what meetings have come to? So I feel we're at a time when dialogue is actually taking place between two monologues. They're just talking to themselves. And so one of the aims of this lecture is to try and encourage all of us to listen to each other, to dialogue really with one another, so that we also find the courage to go beyond our positions, to go beyond my understanding of what is right and what is wrong, and to listen to one another. It's a process. Reverend Keyho said this is just the beginning, perhaps an introduction. And really, it is an introduction of some sort. And it is our hope that we will take it further. But really, at the heart of it is, we have to have a democratic dialogue and not a dialogue between two monologues. Because I think it is the dialogue between monologues that seems to be deciding the fate of the Naga people. And my friends, that is not dialogue. growing up, whenever we did something wrong, we would be like, you leave the home. I think that's a very Naga way of doing. Whenever we are guilty of doing something, our parents, or our village or something, they ask you to leave. But in some cultures, when a child does something wrong, the parents ground their child. Say, don't go out of the house, you're grounded for a week. And somehow there's two distinctions between grounding and expulsion seems to have also framed the way we interact with one another. One is driven by guilt, one is driven by shame. So in our context, we seem to be driven by shame. When someone does something wrong, brings bad repute to your home, your family, you ask them to, you're shameful, you're humiliated. And the Naga discourse in some ways seems to be shaped by this psychological understanding of shame. Because we are so shameful. And so, I feel we need a face-saving mechanism to save face. Because in our context, because shame is such an important aspect of our life, we need to save face, right? Sometimes even when we know we're wrong, we keep doing it till actually there's a mechanism that saves my face from admitting, not publicly, that I was wrong. So somehow I feel we are in that part where, when we know that something is wrong, we still drive it in. Because humiliation is so much part of our pride. And so my question is it possible for our churches to become the face-saving mechanism? A lot of the issues that have been discussed actually can be addressed if there was a way of saving face. Because when we talk about coexistence, when we talk about harmony, when we talk about unity, it's also about saving face. By saving face, I don't mean it in a negative way. So saving face is one. Can the church provide the face-saving mechanism? So that when we are in that part, when we're not willing, even when we know that we are wrong, we're not willing to lower ourselves, we're not willing to humble ourselves because we are so much driven by shame. The second point I want to make is words. In my own personal life, professional life, I've seen how words has a life of its own. Words can either build up or words can destroy. And in this context, I think really the idea of the dialogue is for us to be mindful of the language that we use. We're all part of a newspaper, the Morung Express. And some of the articles that come, really in any other place it would not be published because of the words that we use, the language that we use. And somehow that is related to the kind of relationship we are building. The choice of words, language. And so when we talk about building relationships, building communities, saving face and words, I have to be mindful, I request you to be mindful of the words that we say, of the words that we write, because it has a life of its own. It either builds or it destroys. In Rwanda, the radio was, I think it was last year, the radio station was culpable for the genocide because it was the words that were killing people. It was the words that was dehumanizing people. Where you no longer said, you're a human being. It was words that said, you're killing cockroaches, you're killing insects. It was the radio. Words, my friends, words. But finally, the prophetic imagination. We talk about the church and we talk about the prophetic imagination. But I think, since for me, the church is the people are the church and the church are the people, I think we need a new imagination. Perhaps a prophetic imagination. An imagination that is not bounded by the status quo, but an imagination where we are called to become fully human. Just like as we were created in the image of Christ. To be fully human, a question of prophetic imagination. And so to me, in the Naga case, when we talk about the prophetic imagination, the question of tribe, to me, somehow I kept wrestling with it. To me, I think in today's context, for us to talk about tribes, it's not possible for us to talk about tribes unless we go back to how tribes were formed. Today, in the Morung Express, there was a quotation by Hutton. I think most of you may have heard of Hutton. He wrote several books on different Naga communities. In 1965, long after he had left the Naga Hills, and he went back, 30 years after leaving the Naga Hills, finally he could say, now, after 30 years, looking back, I can say that Nagas are a people. Not in the assortment of tribes or villages. Nagas are a people. To me, that is the standing point. To me, that is the standing point. We talk about international organizations, we talk about legislations. In all legislations, in all legal instruments, they don't talk about tribes, they don't talk about states, they talk about peoples. All peoples have blah, 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 blah. All rights are attributed to peoples, not to states, not to tribes, but to peoples. Problem is, the term peoples is not defined. And so now, a lot of conflicts take place because people are trying to define who the peoples are. Governments will say, Tibetans are not the peoples, they are a minority. America will say, oh, the Navajo nation are not peoples, they are a tribe. And by default, because of the past, we have been relegated from peoples to a scheduled tribe. And today we are caught in this chasm called scheduled tribes and tribalism. So to me, my friends, to me, if we are to address, we have to go back to where it started. It doesn't mean going back to the past, but it means beginning from there. And I think it is in discussions such as this that we really must challenge each other. Not accusing one another, but being firm, being informed. And that is what this dialogue, this lecture hopes to do, is to generate dialogue by raising difficult questions. We may not have all the answers, but it's important for us to own the problems so that in the process of dialoguing as equals, we will find solutions. We must have our own solutions. And so, the prophetic imagination, the shared imagination for the Nagas, is like the spider web weaving a web consisting of so many strands. There's no one strand. There's so many strands in the spider web. We can't say that one strand is more important than, because only together they form the spider web. And so like that, for each one of us as peoples, I think it is important for us to weave a web. By its own, it is very weak. But when a spider web is put together, it's strong. It carries the weight of something much more than what it can. So my friends, I would ask, to encourage that through this lecture and through what we have heard, to continue to wrestle with these issues and to have the courage to dream the prophetic imagination. I just want to leave you with this. Something that inspired me personally is Psalm 85:10. The Spanish version, not the English version, the Spanish version says, Truth and mercy have met, justice and peace have kissed. Truth and mercy have met, justice and peace have kissed. My question to you, are we building a society, a community that stands for truth? Are we building a community that does mercy? Are we building a community that walks with justice? Are we a community that is living in peace? Or are we a community where truth is suppressed, mercy has been blinded, justice has been kidnapped, and peace does not even exist? So I leave that answer to you. Thank you so much for being with us and for